Welcome back, Chiefs Kingdom. This is Locked On Chiefs. We're going to have a great show for you. Matt Derrick is here to keep us straight on everything that I keep forgetting about, and that does happen. Injuries, where they're going, who played most, and I think a couple of surprises. We'll get to it and see what Matt thinks. Welcome to Locked On Chiefs.
It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Mr. Matt Derrick, ChiefsDigest.com. How are you, boss?
I'm hanging in there, Ryan. How about yourself? Good to have you back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. It was a fun time, but you know what? I don't do so well in the heat. I'm more of a polar bear, so you know it is what it is. But I came back to an interesting situation, obviously. Had a couple days to prepare for this last game and see where they were at. And I was personally prepared for them to make some defensive changes like we saw, but I just wasn't quite ready to expect it. In retrospect, I think between the opponent and the changes that they made, I think that paid off for them. My only question to you is how much of it is each, and do you have a feel for, do you think that the staff is still discounting like just what the performance was in terms of the secondary and what they got out of the pass rush?
Well, I think they need to discount it a little bit because this was a Washington team that's middle of the pack at best. I mean, and honestly, that's a little bit on the upside. Now there were things I thought that Washington defensively played better than they probably have been, especially up front, especially early season. You know, Chase Young and that group hadn't been terribly productive. Thought they were kind of productive against the Chiefs offensive line at times, but hey, defensively, you can't complain about that second half performance. I mean, it was solid across the board. And other than the second quarter, which was just a disaster in all phases of the game for the Chiefs, I mean, it was a solid game, but I do grade it on a curve, and I think the coaching staff has to evaluate it on a curve too, because Taylor Heineke is not the other quarterbacks the Chiefs are going to face, and this Washington offense is not the other teams they're going to face. It was a Washington team that had injuries along the offensive line, the receiver core all banged up. I mean, there were plenty of reasons to say that this was not even. This is a middle of the pack Washington team, and it wasn't even them at their best. Mm-hmm. So that to me is why I wouldn't be popping the champagne quite yet that all the changes have worked on defense. They've still got some work to do.
Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of hubbub about Tyrann Mathieu this week, but I don't blame him. I think I know he said in the postgame presser that their goal was to keep him under 10. That should have been their goal, given what they had to work with. I thought they did do a decent job corralling McLaurin, who I think was obviously the biggest threat in my opinion, although I like the way Gibson runs. What did you take away from those two in terms of the focal points in the run versus the pass? Like, how did you think that they did in general mechanically?
I mean, in general, I thought that the defense at least executed the game plan. I mean, clearly Spags wanted to tweak the pass rush a little bit, and I thought that they did that. They got some pressure, obviously, that they haven't been getting on some quarterbacks of late, and they did it. I thought, at least by doing some things that were a little bit new for them. I mean, they were running some twists that I don't think we'd seen before up front, and doing some things that at least get after the quarterback a little bit differently. They're going to have to continue, and that's, I think, to me, been the biggest challenge that this Chiefs defense has had throughout the season is that. The book on the Chiefs now, obviously, we talked about it. It's you've got to be aggressive, but the other part of it is that you got to be out of character. You can't do the things that you do against normal teams. And so far throughout the season, teams have been throwing wrinkles at the Chiefs. Now, I didn't think that Washington threw enough wrinkles at the Chiefs. I didn't think that they did enough and diversified enough offensively to really confuse the Chiefs. So I think that they were able to do a little bit of what at least they wanted to do. But I saw a sounder execution. We weren't seeing some of the big breakdowns that we've seen. There was the one, obviously, that we could always, talk about with Ricky Seals-Jones and letting him get free. But other than that, you saw some, I thought better communication, at least better coordination, everybody on the same page. And as far as just targeting, what Washington did, once again, if I'm Washington, I would have come out with a different game plan. I would have done a lot of what the Eagles tried to do as far as getting the ball out of Heineke's hand quickly, not putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback, because you put the ball in Taylor Heineke's hands, and I think you're going to get what that you got in the second half.
Yeah, it certainly seemed like that to me as well. And when you don't have those horses, especially, if you're going to attack what's weak against the Chiefs defense, it generally is going to be the run game. And they did that to some effect, but I don't think enough. And now I wonder, as we look forward here later in the show, the key question, I think, right now, and we don't have an update on Anthony Hitchens at this point, but I think for this week, that's going to be key. How did you feel that the younger players, particularly Nick Bolton and Willie Gay, who I think should play the majority of the snaps this coming week, how do you think that they performed, or do you think that Ben Niemann deserves to play more if Anthony Hitchens isn't able to play?
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest question is really going to be how big of a role are the Chiefs ready to pile on to Nick Bolton? They've already have, to a degree, put him into a bigger role than they anticipated. He's playing out of his role a little bit. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the Chiefs expect him to eventually be their Mike linebacker in the middle of the field, and they're asking him to play outside, which is a little bit different for him. And he did a little bit of it in college, but it's not what he's going to be playing primarily in the future either. So, the Chiefs are asking him to play a little bit out of position, and certainly playing more than they expected when they drafted him. The expectation was really to bring him on a little bit more slowly, but the injuries to Willie Gay and some other, and the fact that, hey, Nick Bolton so far has accepted and exceeded, at least met all the challenges. I mean, that's a big part of it. But now, are you willing and able to really dump on a full play load on top of him, plus, being responsible for that defense? That's a big ask. And that's why I would be very surprised if we didn't see Ben Niemann. The only other guy that, the Chiefs really have on the roster that they would trust in that position is, on the practice squad with Darius Harris. And if Anthony Hitchens is going to be out any extended period of time, now with IR being 3 weeks, it could be 3 weeks. Maybe you see him get, back up on the roster and fill in a little bit there too. But I would be very surprised if the Chiefs decided that they felt like Nick Bolton was ready to take that role on, just because they want to limit him. They don't want to put him in some positions where he's going to get challenged too much. In this game in particular, he's going to have his hands full trying to deal with Derrick Henry, much less trying to be a leader on that defense.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that coming up, folks. I want to get to what I think the second half meant overall. We'll do that on the backside of this. Hey, Chiefs fans, want to let you know about an incredible app that everybody who drives or buys gas all by itself needs to know about. It's called Get Upside. Our listeners, right now, you get 25 cents off of every gallon that you buy once you sign up with Get Upside. Then on top of it, they're offering right now with a promo code of touchdown, an extra 25 cents, a bonus that you get back. That's 50 cents cash back on every gallon of gas that you buy in your first tank with the Get Upside app. There's a lot of people that drive around and put a lot of miles and a lot of gallons into their vehicles, and they're making a lot of cash back on this. All you have to do to become one of them is to sign up, get that app, Get Upside, and use the promo code touchdown. Then you can get all your rewards back through your bank account, PayPal, or e-card, whatever you would like. Go over there, get the Get Upside app, and use that promo code touchdown. So, Matt, I hate to be overly dramatic, although it's kind of fun sometimes. We've heard the stories about the support Patrick Mahomes got after another terrible decision. I thought clearly after that first drive in the third quarter, I felt like he looked markedly different. I felt like when Tyreek Hill got back in the game, he looked markedly different. Do you think that between that halftime and that first drive, whenever they got it all figured out and clicking, was this the turning point of the season maybe for them to shut down and stop shooting themselves in the foot?
I mean, the next few weeks will tell, but this could certainly be that moment. And if any phrase that came out of the post game in the last couple of days has proven anything to me, it's Andy Reid saying enough is enough. And, I know he kind of put that, mindset onto his players, but I have a feeling that those words came out of his mouth in the locker room at halftime. Now, hey, you guys have been in the NFL will tell you that, hey, there's no rah-rah speech. This isn't Friday Night Lights or, Varsity Blues. Coach isn't going to come in and read a riot act at halftime that's going to make everybody go run through a wall and go win a state championship or anything in the NFL. But you know what? I can certainly see Andy Reid going to that locker room and saying, okay, guys, enough is enough. Knock it off. You're better than this. Stop turning the football over. You don't practice it that way. Don't do it here. You guys on defense, tackle guys, get it done. Enough is enough. Because both sides, every phase of the game, they were markedly different in that second half versus that second quarter. And I going back and just looking at the stats, I can't emphasize just how bad that second quarter was across the board. They didn't stop anybody on defense. They turned over the football like crazy. Mahomes was terrible in that second quarter. And he wasn't alone. I mean, he had plenty of company. So I don't know what the switch was, what it was, whether, it was just simply Reed putting that into those guys to just, that it was enough is enough and to knock it off. But they did. And if they play the way they did in the second half, and I've said it for a while now, if this offense does not turn the football over, they're going to run up and down the field on people, because everything that they're doing offensively, as far as points per possession, every metric you could possibly look at, they are astronomical outliers. And you add in more possessions because they're not turning the football over, they're going to be scoring 40 points a game easily.
Well, if you take out the actual turnover plays, they're even better against the rest of the league. So it is really just those pee in the bed moments that you got to cut out. And if you get that under control, this is a 35, maybe even pushing a 40-point per game offense. If you can ratchet down the defense, you might get there. They need the inspiration. It's interesting to me that if it did come from Andy Reid, a known players coach, a guy that wants his players to have the personality, so that they let that out and he lets his locker room leaders do what they need to do. But if it did come to that point that dad had to come down and lay down the law, I feel like in that situation with his track record, that carries a little bit more weight because it isn't something that he does that often. Do you think that this locker room is receptive to that, or do you think it is the leaders that are really pushing it?
Well, I will say this. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, Andy Reid is not necessarily that guy who's, going to, because he knows how to use it sparingly. He knows that his voice, when used in the right way, will carry its most weight when used infrequently and at the right times. And I mean, I can tell you that I can count on, and I wish I could remember the game that it was. I can count on one hand a time that I have ever heard Andy Reid light into his team at the end of a practice that I've seen. And it was a couple of years ago. And like I said, I wish I could remember the game. I want to say it may have been after that Oakland game a couple of years ago that they kind of really got pushed around a little bit on the road and just absolutely lit into that team on a Friday. That's the kind of thing that Andy Reid will do. So I could certainly see that halftime being that kind of fork in the road moment of him saying, okay, and maybe it was one of the team leaders. I mean, Mahomes talked about the fact that, this was the situation where guys were coming to him trying to bring him up and get his head kind of a little bit focused a little bit, when normally it's the other way around. I mean, normally it's Mahomes going around telling guys not to get their heads down after they've had some rough plays. But in this case, it was other guys having to come to Mahomes. And if it was that, I mean, if it was a player-led moment, that was kind of the enough is enough moment, yeah, I mean, I can see that too, but that was enough. That second quarter was enough. And I think if the Chiefs go on to win a Super Bowl, make the playoffs, win the AFC West, all of these things, I can't see how that's halftime is not going to be the line of demarcation.
Yeah, that's where I'm seeing it too. A couple of standouts that I think made an impact and are going to have to make an impact this next week against the Titans. We're going to talk about that coming up next. This episode of Locked On Chiefs is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a great place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect. A place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing that they have dependable Wi-Fi, that's important, and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team and the away team can come to recharge. It's a place where it always looks forward to stopping at on a long trip and to rest your legs and to refuel. It's easy to get into it on the outside, the backside, the way home from a sporting event. That is incredibly convenient, and that's what they're about. So head to McDonald's, your local one or the one on your way home, to refuel and reconnect. And hey, maybe you'll even find a watch party in there. You're loving it. I'm loving it. Everybody's loving it. One thing you have to know that we're going to tell you about is Built Bar, because they are the best tasting protein bars ever. And it doesn't matter what your favorite flavor is, whether it's coconut brownie chunk or maybe the new grasshopper, the mint. It's incredible. And I even like, this is my new favorite, the toffee almond. All of these have things in common, including 17 grams of protein, only 130 to 150 calories, depending on the flavor. There's all kinds of amazing flavors that keep circulating, and lots of special limited editions that you have to go to the website to check out. You can get that mint brownie or the raspberry or any of these whenever you go over to builtbar.com. When you do, use the locked15 code and you'll get 50% off of your first order. That's the promo code locked15 at builtbar.com. Matt, we looked at the snap counts. We've seen the production. A lot of questions. There's been a lot of injuries on both sides of the ball, but one guy in particular to me has been one of my pet favorites because he's not like an uber high draft pick or anything like that, but a guy that I think has earned his way onto the field and should be a starter from this point forward, in my opinion, is Rashad Fenton. And what did you take from his game and the fact that he played 100% of the snaps this last week?
Yeah, I'm really kind of surprised that it's taken this long because, to me, I go back to even training camp. And I know that the Chiefs, at the time viewed in the training camp, hey, Snead and Ward are our top two corners. And then it was kind of a battle a little bit between Hughes and Fenton. Mm-hmm. And then we even saw Baker kind of, emerged into that. And it's almost as though over the last couple of years since the Chiefs drafted Fenton, they've done everything that they can to try and find anybody else to play in front of him. And the only thing that the dude has done when he gets snaps is respond and play. Right. And I don't know why they keep looking for somebody better because he's played really, really well. I think the biggest thing I think has been an issue is that, that the Chiefs have traditionally viewed him as a nickel corner, a guy that was maybe better suited to play inside. And then last year, what hurts him is, L'Jarius Sneed comes along and they feel like he's better inside. Mm-hmm. And that kind of took away Fenton's role a little bit. But I've never seen that guy get his head down. I mean, I've never seen that guy not give his full effort. And you look at it, and like I said, I mean, they've given so many other guys chances to try and play in front of him. And yet every time when it comes back to his turn, his opportunity, he responds. So I'm with you. I mean, I think Fenton needs to be that solid number 3 consistently, especially, as long as Ward's out, he needs to be a starter. Yeah. And I don't understand, why he wouldn't be in the top 3 rotation when Ward does come back. I mean, Baker, I think, is still coming back from that injury. Hughes has had some up and down and inconsistent moments, but I think that Fenton overall has been arguably, and I think you could arguably make it, he's been their second most consistent corner after Snead.
I like where you're going with that. And this is not to, come down on Mike Hughes. He's actually performed better this season so far than I expected, and better than he did the last season and a half in Minnesota. So the change of location has helped him. The change of coaching staff has helped him. But I agree with you, and especially this week, with Derrick Henry coming at you, with or without Taylor Warren, we'll see what happens there. But Hughes is not a guy that's coming down on him. He's not going to grab him by the shoelaces and get Derrick Henry on the ground. Even if Ward gets back, and I think that they desperately need Ward back in order to really solidify this thing, it's got to be Fenton as the starter on the outside, in my opinion. I like he and Snead on the same side because I think you can then use Snead to blitz at Henry, and I'll send Snead all day long on him. Despite the collarbone thing, I think that's a viable aspect to this game plan. Do you?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, Fenton and Snead are both physical guys. I mean, they're willing to get up and lay some hits. They're not afraid of contact. And that's really something that's important to have. And I think you're right. I mean, having both those guys on the field in a game like this, it's going to be as physical as that it's going to be. This might not be a great week for Charvarius Ward to try and come back as it is from an injury. I mean, I'd hate to be that guy this week coming back, maybe not 100%. So, hey, if it takes you another week for Charvarius Ward, I don't think that's a problem. I mean, to me, if I am Tennessee, though, I am going to be, looking for Mike Hughes' side of the field. I mean, when he's out there, that's the guy that I would be trying to target. And you got a couple of guys that, hey, if they're even semi-healthy, and A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are good guys to target. So, I mean, that could be a problem. But, the Titans are going to try and run the football. And I think in those situations, I think those are your two best guys. I mean, to me, the real question is going to be is, do the Chiefs go with a third safety, or do they go heavy with linebacker and just, stay in their typical 4-3 base most of this game? That's going to be the question to me. And that's going to come down to a question of, how much is Dan Sorensen on the field? And is he the guy that, can play Derrick Henry in both the run and the pass?
That's going to be the question mark, because I agree with you. Like, And before we get to that, they do need linebacker help, but this is almost a position where, with Ward out, a guy who cannot flip sides, I would be tempted to put Snead on Julio Jones and just call it that and let him shadow him all night long. He's going to lose some reps. That's certainly baked into the equation, but I think that sets everything else up to allow more linebacker play. I think Willie Gay has to be the number one guy. They have to blitz more. They have to attack the run game of the Titans in order to stymie it. You're never going to stop Derrick Henry. If they keep him under 150 yards and a touchdown, I think they're doing really well, but it will take multiple linebackers to do it.
Yeah, and I'm really curious, what we do hear from Steve Spagnuolo this week about Willie Gay, because he didn't play as much against Washington as I expected, and whether that's just a case of them bringing him along slowly. Coaches will never tell you that, hey, they're trying to keep a guy in reserve for a game down the road. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted to make sure that Willie Gay didn't have, too much on that toe, and he wanted to be 100% healthy for this game against the Titans, I could buy that. I mean, Steve Spagnuolo is probably not going to tell us that. But I was kind of surprised, because I think you're right. I mean, they're going to need him a lot more this week than the 18 snaps that he got against Washington. Yeah, you're going to need Willie Gay. You're going to need Willie Gay for a lot more than that.
Yeah, less than half of Bolton or Neiman, and he's the best guy taking on blocks. So there's no question about it, folks. We're going to get deeper into it. Chris will have the crossover for you tomorrow. We'll have the preview on Friday. We'll get Matt back post-game. Matt, thank you for the time, and I hope you're ready for this one.
I hope we're all ready for this one. It's going to be a fun one.
Thanks, folks. We'll talk to you tomorrow.